evening, Canada. Today is April 17th, 1982. One of the most important events in Canadian history has just taken place. Canada now has its own constitution. This is an exciting day for Canadians from coast to coast. My name is Knowlton Nash, and I am reporting from the nation's capital. This afternoon, Queen Elizabeth II and Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau made history by signing the official Canadian Constitution. Before this monumental day, Canadians' legal system was under rule of British law. Even though the Westminster Act enabled Canada to become its own country, the Westminster Act did not enable Canada to have its own constitution. But now, thanks to Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Queen Elizabeth II, we finally have our own constitution. Joining me now is the Right Honourable Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who will share his thoughts about this historic day. Mr. Trudeau, all of Canada wants to know how you feel about this historic day.
I'm very excited today. Today is a great day for Canada. We are officially 100% our own country. We have done this by uniting one and all. There has been talk lately of a certain province separating from the rest of the country, but today we have silenced those rumors. Canada is now whole.
You played an important role in keeping Quebec in Canada during the referendum. In your opinion, how will this impact Quebec?
Well, in my opinion, the new constitution will negatively impact Quebec. It was the only province not to sign the constitution. Even the Quebec flag was ordered to half-mast during the constitutional signing ceremony. There will be a lot of tension between the federal government and the provincial government because of the Night of the Long Knives.
The Night of the Long Knives? What does that have to do with Quebec being negatively impacted by the Constitution?
Well, the Night of the Long Knives was a crucial part in the finalization of the Canadian Constitution because the premiers and I finally agreed on what the Charter of Rights and Freedoms should look like. During the time before the Night of the Long Knives, I was trying to bring the country together, but the provinces disagreed with me. In my opinion, I think it was because they didn't want a strong federal government. They liked having all the power to themselves. Only Premier Bill Davis of Ontario and Richard Hatfield of New Brunswick supported me. The rest of the provinces formed a little alliance, which was called the Gang of Eight. I told the premiers, especially the Gang of Eight, that I've been warning you since 1976. We'll go to it alone, we'll go to London, and we won't even bother asking a single premier to join us. The Gang of Eight took my threat to Supreme Court. I wanted Supreme Court, but needed to bring a number of premiers to accompany me to England if we were going to close the deal, to show that they supported the decision. But it couldn't just be a couple of premiers. It had to be a substantial number. I held a last chance meeting in Ottawa so that we could try and find a solution for the problem. After 3 days of going back and forth, I finally asked, why don't we just get patriation first? The Gang of Eight agreed with me. Everyone was staying in the same hotel in Ottawa during the time, except for Mr. Levesque, who stayed in Quebec. The third night, there was a lot of late night bargaining, and I was mad because I had to make a compromise. In that compromise, I had to give in to allowing provinces to override the Canadian Charter of Rights. But in return, Mr. Levesque lost his opting out clause. It was a deal I had to make. The next morning, Mr. Levesque was in shock because he had lost his prized possession, the opting out clause. This is why people in Quebec call this day the Night of the Long Knives, because they believe that the rest of Canada stabbed them in the back, if you will.
Wow, that must have been a stressful time for you and all the premiers.
Yes, it was, but it was very necessary.
Speaking of another stressful time, the October crisis. During the October crisis, you made one of the most controversial decisions in Canadian history by evoking the War Measures Act. Why did you vote, and why did you evoke the War Measures Act?
Well, as you know, the FLQ kidnapped James Cross, the British Trade Minister, and Quebec Labour Minister Pierre Laporte. They were going to kill both men if we didn't do something. So I thought that the only thing that we could do was go to war on the FLQ. So that's what we did. We brought in the army to all the major cities across Canada, and cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. There were guns everywhere. Most Canadians didn't like this, but it was to ensure their safety. If the FLQ tried to kidnap anyone else, the army would be able to stop them. I invoked the War Measures Act because it gave the police the right to arrest and imprison anyone without a trial. I knew that if we arrested enough people linked to the FLQ, that we'd be able to find the whereabouts of the two men. I wasn't going to stop until they were found. In the end, my plan was partially successful because we did find James Cross and we rescued him safely.
Did the October crisis cause you to push for a Canadian constitution, or did you already have a clear picture of what you wanted to do to bring the country together?
Well, yes, the October crisis did have an impact on my decision for a Canadian constitution. I wanted to unite the country as a whole. I wanted to push for patriation because there were so many problems with occurring in Quebec, including the separation movement. I wanted to resolve all these problems by making the country a whole. I believed if I could get rid of the concern of separation, the problem would disappear. So yes, the October crisis did play a role in pushing for a Canadian constitution.
Now let's open the floor to questions from the media.
Hello, John Smith from the Ottawa Citizen. Mr. Trudeau, can you explain what will be different as a result of this constitution?
For the average Canadian, there will probably be little to no difference in their day-to-day lives. But those people who feel discriminated against, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms will give them rights that will be written down and be required to be followed by law. These laws will protect all Canadians from further discrimination, which I believe is essential to being fair and to a fair and just Canada.
Any other questions?
Hi, Sanjay Patel, Toronto Star. You referenced the Canadian Charter of Rights. Please explain what that is.
Well, the important part of the new Constitution is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Like I said earlier, the new Charter of Rights gives every single Canadian the same rights and freedoms. The Charter gives Canadians the right to all democratic processes, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the right to vote, and many other fundamental rights. The Charter also allows Canadians to speak their own language. Everyone is allowed to practice and speak their own language as well, even though we have 2 official languages. The Charter also ensures rights for Aboriginal people. This is a significant part of the Charter because in the past, Aboriginal people were treated like outcasts. Now the Charter of Rights and Freedoms finally brings equal rights to Canadian Aboriginal peoples that matches the rest of Canada. Everyone is supposed to be equal, but the truth is that minorities, like the Canadian Aboriginal peoples, are treated differently. Because of this Charter of Rights, everyone in Canada is now 100% equal.
With that answer, Mr. Trudeau, we draw the evening to a close. As always, it's been a pleasure. Good night.